Well, we are so fortunate that Claudia has remained here. There was a brief hiatus where you went off and then realized that Bowdoin was your home, so you're back. But as our dean for admissions and student aid and a central part of the leadership of the college, I want to welcome everybody. It is just simply fantastic to be in a place where we're coming back together. We're careful and thoughtful about how we do it and mindful of the changing environment. But it's just fantastic to have you all here, to allow you to be on campus, to give you the opportunity to really get a true sense of what Bowdoin is all about. I thought I would do a couple of things reasonably briefly and then leave time for questions. And as I always say when I do these things, there's nothing that's out of bounds. So I really, if there's a question that's on your mind, please ask it. And it'll be something I suspect that others are thinking about as well. The first is just to touch on COVID for a second. I want to acknowledge for our students and families here what a brutal couple of years it's been for you. There's no other way to put it. The world's been upended. There's been deep tragedy in so many ways. Some of those of you in the room have suffered intense tragedy through this. But everyone has gone through, and all of our students here, high school experience that was nothing that you planned and was incredibly challenging and difficult, and each in your own ways. Very similar in some ways, very different in others. And I just want to acknowledge that you're coming into college with that background. We've had our own challenges here. It's been very challenging for our students over the last couple of years as well. I will say I've been so proud of the way that our community, students, faculty, staff, alumni, the folks in town here have rallied together, supported one another, worked hard to continue to keep one another safe and to provide a great education and as strong an experience as we could provide given the constraints of COVID. And I think we were pretty successful at that. There will always be things that we will have learned. We're really ready for the next pandemic, so I think we've got the playbook for that. I say all that as a prelude to the idea that our philosophy now, and I wrote about this in January and again recently, and you can, if you really are deeply interested, you can go on the part of the website where I have my messages to the community. They're all there. And talked about our move back into normal, recognizing that the virus is going to be with us for a really long time as a society and a world. But we have great vaccines that prevent us from getting really sick. We've got treatments that allow those that get it and are in compromised positions to get treated and keep them from getting very sick. And we've got other strategies through testing, masking, and so forth that we can use and bring into play and take out of play as are necessary. And these are things that will be going on as we get to normal. And next year, our commitment, subject to something really bizarre happening, is that we'll be running the college in a way that feels very normal, as it should be. We're largely in a state like that now, notwithstanding the fact that we have a bit of a surge here and in the area and on other college campuses and in the country as a function of this subvariant BA2. But we're all kind of getting ourselves there, recognizing that everybody needs to get comfortable and we're walking back in and everybody's got to do this in a particular way. So I look forward to the fall. I look forward to college that feels like the college experience that you envision. So let me touch on two other things. My view about what a liberal arts education is all about, and as Claudia said, I'm the product of a liberal arts education at a different institution, but I was just talking to some folks here about this, a true geek for the liberal arts. It's why I was so, this role and being at Bowdoin was so important to me when I put my hat in the ring a number of years ago to be here. And then I'll touch for a second on what I think makes Bowdoin special and a bit different from other great colleges. And for our students here, especially those of you that are still in the process of trying to decide, what's most important is finding the place that fits for you. I hope you'll be here. We chose you for a reason, but ultimately what matters is finding the place where you're going to be happy, satisfied, that's going to work for you and providing you all the things that you want out of a great college education. So what is a liberal arts education? Why is it so important? And for me, there are three parts of this answer. The first is that it allows you to engage with the world throughout your life in a way that helps you understand political, social, economic, cultural issues, and to learn as you are going, to lead a life that is fulfilling and satisfying and to be able to understand all of the issues and challenges in a nuanced way, and to keep learning over the course of your life. So it's very personal, very selfish. It's an education that is with you forever. The second, and this really gets to the heart of what a liberal arts education was all about when we go back to antiquity, where the idea and the term liberal arts really first came. It's not a political, unfortunately been politicized a little bit in the world we're in today. But it was really an education that was designed to allow you to participate in the civic life of the city that you lived in. That notion still holds true today. And we strive deeply here to educate our students and to provide them with experiences that will allow you to participate in civic life, to engage in the important issues of the day. And it's a blindingly obvious comment to say that we need this now more than ever, and we need you now more than ever. And the third is that it's an education that allows you to have both success and satisfaction in the work that you will do when you leave here and the career or careers that you will pursue. And it's not just the tools for success, but it's the mindset for that satisfaction. How do I understand my passions? How do I adjust and change over time? How do I have the flexibility in a highly changing work environment to be able to find those things that are going to be interesting and challenging and satisfying to me? We can spend a few minutes talking about careers and our career planning, career exploration and development area. We think about that as an entry to exit responsibility that we have. It's not simply you get together in the senior year and we help you find a job. We have a full 4-year engagement with career planning, career exploration and development here as part of this success and satisfaction goal that we have. So those are the 3 parts of the liberal arts education that for me speak to me today. I don't think I could have, I'm certain I could not have articulated it that way when I was in your shoes, but behind the scenes somewhere in my head these things were going on. Now what about Bowdoin? And for me, these are things that drew me to the college, and there are things that I see and believe continue to make Bowdoin distinct from other great colleges and universities out there. Every one of our peer schools is filled with great students who, like you, are super smart, super accomplished, have done all sorts of different things, and bring a diverse set of identities, lived experiences, backgrounds, interests to the college or the college that you will go to. So that's kind of table stakes. What is it about Bowdoin? The first for me, and I think about these as the 3 C's, even though it's 2 C's and a K, is collaboration. This is an environment where we put a premium on collaborating with one another, where we don't see education and our students don't see education as a zero-sum game that for me to do well, you have to somehow do less well. And you need to road test this today and while you're here with students and faculty and others who are here. But this is about seeing education as a collaborative exercise where we are all helping one another to learn and we can all do well at the same time. The second, and that permeates the culture beyond the classroom here as well in all the kinds of activities that we engage in. The second is community. This is a community that supports one another, is devoted to one another. One manifestation of it is the way our alum feel about the college and their engagement, both in terms of financial support, which is amazing, but in their support and engagement on campus with students. We had over 300 alums work with our students in February at our sophomore boot camp, which is part of our career exploration and development effort. We have all 500 of our sophomores were involved in this week-long program, and we had 300 alums that were back doing this. So this sense of community on campus with the town, we have an enormously great town-gown relationship, and in the broader alumni community, knitting all these pieces together. And then the third C, which is really a K, is kindness. And this is a very distinct attribute. It's different from the notion of being nice, which is important, but there's an underlying sense that we treat each other with kindness. We have a respect for one another. Obviously, every day isn't a great day. That doesn't mean everybody's got a smile on their face every day. We all have bad days. We all have challenges. But fundamentally, we treat each other with kindness here. So I'm going to stop there. I'm happy to talk about any of that. I'm happy to talk about anything that's on anybody's mind. that would be interesting and helpful to, as part of the process here, understanding Bowdoin a little bit better. So, and I think there's some microphones there, so if there are questions, we can go for it. So who's going to be that brave soul? I taught at Harvard, so I'm happy to cold call people, and it gets my juices. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for meeting us today. I really was interested to know what types of supports are available for students of color. That was one of the, I was totally fascinated that there are like 40% students of color here on campus, and I couldn't believe it, that it's not an HBCU. But it's a place where I've come just in one day and felt very welcome. And I'm just thinking about my son, who I will leave here, and how he will feel and what types of supports he will have when he comes.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I'm glad, thank you for sharing that you've felt welcomed here, which is great, which I hope has been true for everyone. So we do have about 40% of our student body are students of color. We began an effort 2 decades ago to grow and change the diversity of our campus in a really robust way. In the last 2 years, following the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others, we've entered a new chapter in our work on diversity, equity, inclusion, racial justice, social justice, and tying all of those together. And there is a lot that I've written about that's available on the place where I share my messages on the website, to the extent that it's helpful to read about it in an organized way. But in terms of support for students, there's an enormous amount for students generally and for our students of color. It comes in the form of the work that the Dean's Office does individually with each student, trying to understand and help them navigate it based on their identities and lived experiences and who they are and what their goals are and so forth, and the challenges that they may face. We have an Office of Inclusion and Diversity and a Chief Diversity Officer run by Benji Douglas here, who I don't think you're going to get a chance to meet Benji today, but provides the oversight of all of our DEI work, but also spends time with our students, is completely available to our students to talk about their issues. We have a multicultural center here, which supports students of color generally, and from a variety of different backgrounds. And then we have the John Brown Rustrum House, which is the center of our Black student life on campus, and the home of the Black Student Union on campus. And that is a self-sustaining house. It's next actually to where admissions is, so right just behind where the admissions is. And there's a lot of programming that they do for themselves and support that they get from the college and so forth. There are affinity groups that are put together on campus, supported by student activities and by the Bowdoin student government. And then within the classroom, we've got, and more broadly, Black faculty and staff who engage with and faculty and staff of color that engage with our students of color. And this is an interesting challenge for us and other colleges and universities today, because we have more students of color than we do faculty of color, than we do staff of color. And so having them be able to focus on their work and also provide support, I will say that they are available to our students in enormously generous ways throughout the course of the year, throughout the course of the summer, and once they graduate, actually. And they build very strong relationships for our students. So all of that is a way to say that we've got kind of strong institutional structures at the college to support our students and our students of color. And then there's a set of individualized relationships that idiosyncratically evolve depending on who wants to go talk to whom. And that's one of the beauties of a small place, is that navigating that and finding people that are going to provide support and with whom you want to spend time happens more naturally and more easily than it might at a big place where it's easier to get kind of lost and where those structures are going to be even more important. So I hope that was somewhat helpful to you. Yeah, thank you. Question down here, Sarah. Yeah. Hold on one sec for the mic so that, yeah, I know, between the mask and looking at me.
Thank you, thank you. Can you just comment on the co-ed nature of the dormitories. Are they all mixed with men and women? Do they alternate floors, or are they right next door?
So I'm going to leave that question for you. After I'm done here, Jen Scanlon, our Dean for Academic Affairs, and Janet Lohmann, our Dean for Student Affairs, will be up. I'm tempted to answer it, but I know I'll get it wrong a little bit, and then we'll just go down a rabbit hole that I probably shouldn't go down. But Janet will be able to answer that. So, yeah. There's one right there, and I might be mindful of this side of the room, too. Yeah.
So my question is, how does Bowdoin's small student size add value to the college, especially when compared to some of the larger institutions that you worked at and studied at previously?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer that in a couple of ways. I think, first of all, this is an individual decision, right? There's some of us who feel more comfortable in a larger place for any number of particular reasons, and some of us who feel more comfortable in a smaller place. And to touch a little bit on what I said before, I think one of the great values, at least for those who are here, of the size that we have at Bowdoin, is that you get to know everybody. And this place feels like a place where you, not in your first day or your first semester, right? But over the course of a couple of semesters, you know how to navigate it. You know Patty in the dining hall that's serving you. You know your dean. You're having dinner at your faculty member's house. You're engaged with the folks in student activities. You may have a host family in town that you've developed a relationship with and go to Sunday dinner at their house. These are all of these things are things that you can find and navigate and choose for yourselves. I'm going to touch on one academic aspect of this, and then I'm going to, and then Jen Scanlon, our Dean for Academic Affairs, can add to it or correct me once I'm out of the room. But one of the interesting things is to think about, and I know it's a long way from now, but as you think about what may come next and whether you're interested in graduate programs and so forth, one of the benefits of true benefit of a large university is that you have doctoral programs, you have graduate students, and so in any of the disciplines, you have the opportunity to engage in more higher level classes with graduate students, postdocs, and so forth. The downside of that, it's not a downside, it's a difference, right? I want to be very careful here because it's a thing you really need to each of you want to think through, is that the educational experience will be different in two ways. At a place like Bowdoin, you are working directly with your faculty member from the first day. There are no teaching assistants here, no graduate students that stand between you and the faculty member. And the classes are small, and you really get to know your faculty in a way that isn't possible at a larger university, at least on there may be a one-off difference. But in the context, too, of work that you want to do later, there's this interesting trade-off between perhaps having had exposure to some of the higher level knowledge and skills that come in a graduate class that you may be able to take, versus working with a faculty member here on a research project or an honors project where you define the question and the issues that you want to go after, and you define and help to put together the research project that you want to go after. You're not working on somebody else's. And we find that when our students go into graduate programs head-to-head with somebody who's been at Harvard or MIT or wherever, they do extremely well because they're prepared to think about, independently to think about the work that they need to do, how to ask the questions, how to form the research questions, how to put the research project together. And that is very powerful in terms of, again, it depends on your disposition and who you are, but those are a couple of the differences, and I hope are helpful. And Jen and Janet can add to that when they get up here. Oh, where? Oh, up. Ah, there we go. Yeah, go for it.
So as president, what are the initiatives that you're most excited about?
Okay. So what are the initiatives that I'm most excited about? So I'll give you a couple of them. So first, the work that we're doing around DEI and have been doing for the last couple of years. This is a long-term journey. We recognize the nature and challenge of the work that we have to do here. The community is all in on this. And we're also, I think, humbled by the idea that we don't have any of the answers. We're working this changing, trying to figure it out as we go along, and I'm happy to spend more time on that as others are. So that's one. The second is we have a deep commitment to access here. So half of our students are on aid. We are need blind in admission. We're no loan, grant only in the program, and we meet the full calculated need of each family. And we're one of 20 schools in the nation that's able to do that. And that is we could talk about that as being a competitive thing, right? But it's a cultural thing for us about, and it really goes very far back in our history here and kind of who we are. But being able to say to a student, if you get into Bowdoin, you're going to be able to come to Bowdoin, regardless of your family's financial situation. And then we have an extensive amount of resources, both financial and support resources that are available to our students that sit outside of what we would normally consider to be the student aid package. And we continue to enhance those. So one example of that is the recently announced Digital Excellence Commitment, where beginning for all of you, we will put in every student's hand when you walk in, figuratively, a MacBook Pro and an iPad mini with a pencil. And there are a bunch of reasons that we're doing that, but creating equity in the classroom for the hardware platform and the ability to deliver software to each of our students is a profoundly important part of where education is going. And we don't want there to be a difference between student A and student B and student C. We just wanted to eliminate that difference. So allocating our resources in that particular way, and ultimately we make decisions about what we can and we can't do. But so that would be the second. The third is the work that continues to evolve, and Jen will talk about this with our faculty and our curricular program here. It's just an amazing group of faculty who continue to be so both dedicated to their scholarship and to their teaching, which is a very hard thing to ask faculty to do both of those things at the same time. And coming off of a year of a pandemic, we had a huge number of new courses that were introduced in the semester. So faculty have been working their tails off, and yet they still managed to put up, 50 new courses in the fall semester, and some equal number in the spring. I just have lost the thread on that number. So, if I want to step outside of what goes on campus, we're about in the middle of a comprehensive fundraising campaign, the From Here campaign. We set an ambitious goal in February of 2020 of $500 million, and it raised $300 by the time we went public in February of 2020. We're now more than 85% of the way done through the pandemic, which speaks volumes about the commitment that our alumni have and our parents have to this college. So those are a couple of examples I hope are helpful. Yeah. I'm getting the hook here. One more question. Okay. Yes. Whenever we do one more question, it means that question is really going to be a hard one. So.
Morning.
Morning.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the resources available for transfer students to make a seamless transition from their current institution to Bowdoin, advice you might have because you're here for a shorter period of time compared to incoming freshmen, but also if you could speak to the value, as you see it, that transfer students bring to the Bowdoin community.
Yeah, so let me talk a little more about the second one, and then I'm going to punt that first one to Claudia, who can jump in, and also to Janet, who so this is a relatively new. Well, we've had transfer students here for a really long time, but in smaller numbers than we are doing now. We've made a conscious effort in the last couple of years to really increase the number of transfer students, and in particular to invite two cohorts of students that we have traditionally not invited. One is community college students, and the other are veterans. And we've had good success so far this year, and some of you are here, and we're really looking forward to making those two groups of students a permanent part of the Bowdoin community. The transfer students, the value that they bring, I think first and foremost is that they bring the values and the character and the integrity and the desire to learn and live in a community like ours to Bowdoin. So there's a genuine interest in being part of the Bowdoin community. It will necessarily be a different experience having been somewhere else and having a shorter time frame to think about it. But and with students who've come from a similar school, peer school after a year or two, who decided that wasn't their cup of tea. The transition in here is easier. It feels easier, and Jen and Claudia can talk about some of the specific ways that we help students to settle in and get going here. But they bring a different perspective, and a perspective that in the classroom and in the dorms and in the other activities they have here just add that additional layer to all of the other different perspectives that go on here about what was different, what was not as good, what was better there, and provide another framework for thinking about what's out there in the world and so forth. For our students who are coming to us from community colleges and our veterans, they're going to bring a set of life experiences that are very different than we've traditionally had here, and I think incredibly important and valuable for all of our students here, both in the classroom and more generally in a residential community. And this is one of the reasons that we really amped up this program. It's going to help educate our students and provide all of our students on both sides of that equation with a more robust experience here. And I will also want to be honest about it. We're in the first few years of this program, right? We're not going to get everything right. We're going to want to learn as much as we can from the experience of our students who are here, get better at it. There are things that we'll do well, some of them intentionally, some by accident, and there are things that we will not do as well, and we're going to want to keep improving as we go along here. So that's part of an answer, and then Janet and Claudia can jump in and provide you with that. So I hope that's helpful. So. Okay, welcome. It is fantastic to have you here. I look forward to seeing some of you on campus and wandering around. Have a great visit, great weekend. And to our students who have yet to decide, good luck with the decision. I hope you end up here, but whatever you do, whatever decision you make will be a great decision for all of you, and you'll find the place that fits you best. To our students who have decided, or those that are going to decide to come here, I cannot wait to see you in the fall. So good luck. Thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Good morning. We're going to get started for the next piece of our program here. Just want to say hello. My name is Jen Scanlon, and I'm the Dean for Academic Affairs at Bowdoin. I've been at Bowdoin, this is my 20th year, and most of the time I have spent here as a faculty member in gender, sexuality, and women's studies. I'm a historian by training, and I've had a really wonderful time here teaching and now representing the faculty. And that's what I really want to do this morning, is speak on behalf of our faculty and our curriculum. So again, to echo everything that's been said, congratulations to all of you. We hope to be welcoming all of you in the fall, those of you who have already made up your minds, and those of you who will have this opportunity to get to know us a little bit, and hopefully we will, through lots of conversation and through class visits and through wandering around our campus, you will get the feeling that this really is the right place for you or for those who have left us and are now visiting those classes. So I want to say not a lot, a few things about the academic side of things, and then after my colleague Janet speaks, we'll be happy to take questions. And for the students who remain in the room, this is a great place to start your Bowdoin questioning right here today with all of us. I didn't know what Clayton's remarks were going to be, so there is some parallel with mine, and maybe that's a good thing, that we actually really do see this place in similar ways. We didn't talk about it, but it's interesting to see what emerges for both of us as we think about what's important here. And the word that came to me first was community, and community of learners. Again, I'm thinking about classroom and the academic experience. Community of learners and teachers, scholars and artists and doers who really are deeply engaged in what it means to learn and grow. We do that using our founding principle, one of our founding principles of the common good, and the idea that with what we learn, we have an obligation and we can make a difference in the world. And I have always maintained my years here, my years before I came to Bowdoin, I taught in the SUNY system in New York, that education is the most powerful means of positive social change. I really believe that, and I believe that that's what we're doing in our classes that address those issues and in our classes that don't. So what happens here? Students really stretch intellectually, and they do so under the guidance of an amazing group of faculty. And as I said, I come from the faculty. Now I have the enormous privilege of representing the Bowdoin faculty. And one important thing I would say about our faculty is that I really believe our faculty could teach anywhere. They are remarkable scholars and artists and performers. They're very deliberate about wanting to teach in a place like Bowdoin where their scholarship really matters, but their teaching also really matters, and their relationships with students really matters. So there's this unique combination in our faculty that I believe is really powerful and I believe is evident inside of our classrooms. It's a commitment to their own work. They take great pride in it. I think a lot of times students don't understand that component of faculty. They don't really know that faculty are deeply engaged in producing knowledge, but they are, and they're also committed to students. One of the things I think our faculty love, that I loved from the first day I came to Bowdoin, was that when I walk in the classroom, I have to be on top of my game. That is a really powerful thing, and it's a really good thing, and it's a really energizing thing for me, because our students are there to learn. And so they have high expectations that real engagement is going to happen, and it does. And what's interesting is, I think, from the student or the family perspective is, what is the impact of that energy on students? It's super positive. But I also just want to say, again, as I'm speaking on behalf of the faculty, that it's also an environment that's really positive for our faculty, too. It's just a great space. The learning, though, takes place in the classroom, but also in other places. So as the Dean of Academic Affairs, I also am responsible for our library, our museums, our scientific field stations. So there's learning that takes place in many places, in and outside of the classroom. And in the library, late night study sessions in various places. And one of the things I also love about Bowdoin is how students will find any nook and cranny anywhere on campus and turn it into a little collaborative workspace, or a space to find a chair that they can work in and find some quiet space. So learning takes place clear across the campus, as does deep thinking and engagement. Clayton mentioned our commitment to the liberal arts and to what is called liberal education. And again, liberal not in the sense of political, but liberal in the sense of spread out. We are deeply committed to that, our faculty, because we believe what we're doing is we're encouraging students to develop multiple ways of seeing things, multiple methodological approaches, lots and lots of ways to entertain a question and to understand that you don't get to an answer quickly. I like to think of students' opportunity here at Bowdoin as a chance to kind of slow down a little bit. The world is moving really fast, but the questions that we are posing about the world, they can't be answered in such rapid fashion. They actually really require us to think, okay, maybe this is the right answer, but wow, I haven't thought of these three other things. And so I do really believe that a liberal education enhances that, because students have to look at something from one point of view, but then they go take a class that's in another discipline, and they start to see connections. So we are not a pre-professional place. We don't have our students just take a certain set of courses. But equally importantly, I would say, I have 2 kids and I did lots of college visits. One of the things I really value about Bowdoin is we also don't say, we don't require anything of you. You can study whatever you like and you can create your own pathway. We look at it a bit differently. We say, no, we actually believe that the kind of learning we're looking for requires students to get outside their comfort zones intellectually and academically. And so we have a series of distribution requirements. They require students to take courses in the natural sciences, in quantitative work, in visual and performing arts, across the curriculum. So that, again, the way you might think you're arriving at an answer, suddenly now you're in a dance class, and the ways that you use your body has you questioning some things you might have learned in another class. And we really, really value that. Clayton mentioned diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on campus, and those are closely related to this work that we see about liberal learning or learning kind of across a range of disciplines. So last year, the faculty voted in a significant change to one of our distribution requirements. It used to be called Exploring Social Difference. And what the faculty arrived at over many, many conversations was that it's important that our students explore social differences, but it's also equally important that they place themselves in that process. And so what used to be called Exploring Social Difference is now called Difference, Power, and Inequity. And it takes a deeper dive into what it is to how structural things work in our world and how we need to explore those to be able to make change. Just a couple more things I want to say. Our faculty work really hard. As I said, they're highly accomplished scholars and artists, performers, but they work really hard on their teaching as well. And just the other day, I was at we have a weekly faculty seminar series, which is a wonderful thing at Bowdoin, another element of a small place. We have faculty who are in many disciplines, but we have a lunch every week where a faculty member presents their research. And they present it in ways, that an educated layperson would understand, right? So if I, as a historian, if I go to a talk and they're speaking about atmospheric science, they do it in such a way that I can, grasp enough of it to feel like I'm gaining something and to be able to be in conversation. It's a really wonderful event for faculty every week. But this week's faculty seminar series was a group of faculty who are faculty fellows at our Bowdoin Center for Learning and Teaching. So what they are is a group of 5 or 6 faculty who have devoted themselves this year to meeting 3 times a month, I think it is, to talk about teaching and to think about what kinds of innovations they can bring to the classroom. And in this case, each of these faculty members is trying to think about pedagogically, how do I make sure I'm reaching all of my students? How do I make sure that I'm creating an inclusive classroom environment? And each one of them gave a presentation about the variety of things that they're doing, the ways that they do group work, the ways they think about grading, etc. And it was really inspiring to see people who do devote a lot of time to their own work to also be engaged in thinking about how do we continually make our classrooms better places. So I'm going to stop there and turn things over to Jen, my colleague, and I'll be happy to answer questions when we're both in those chairs.
Good morning, everyone. I will say Jen and I are trying to space out so that we can be without masks up here. So that's why we're trying to just make sure we're spread apart, not because we dislike each other. We are actually following our protocols. I just want to echo what you've heard a number of times today, which is welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. The weather has delivered, and that's been lovely. And I really hope that you are taking advantage of all of the opportunities to get to know this place, get to know the people, get to know the staff, faculty, and students who create this community. That's come up a lot, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means from my lens. As Jen said, I'm Janet Lohmann, and I am the Senior Vice President and Dean for Student Affairs. I've been here 19 years, so I think about Claudia, who's been here 20 years, Jen, who's been here 20 years. I've been here 19 years, so the 2002, 2003 was a big year. I was started here as a faculty member. I was a visiting faculty member for a number of years. My PhD is in sociology, and so I work in the fields of social stratification and primarily in criminology and the criminal justice system, and worked a lot with women offenders for a long period of time. I then moved into student affairs in about 2009, and so student affairs are all of the things that students experience at a residential college that are beyond the academic program. I don't want to say it's an or. I don't want to say faculty are, the academic program is one thing and student affairs is another thing. We work in tandem in lots and lots of different ways. But in a residential space where you're living here and you're sleeping here and you're getting to know people here, there are a whole host of ways in which students compose their daily lives that are beyond the academic program. Now, I want to recognize that students are here to get a degree, and that is the priority that needs to be situated. But my staff, there's 137 of us, and there's 16 different offices, of which I'll get into, really help students flesh out what it means to be in this place and think about other ways in which they want to contribute. So that, as I said, there are 16 different offices in the Division of Student Affairs. They include athletics, CXD, Clayton referenced that a couple of times, which is our career exploration and development. Multicultural life, that got brought up a little bit by Clayton earlier. Our religious and spiritual life. Sexuality, Women, and Gender Center. We have Upward Bound here at Bowdoin, which primarily works with first-gen students who are in Maine. We have student accessibility, so questions around accessing and accessibility is under the Division of Student Affairs. Residential life, it's a residential campus. We expect our students to be living in this community. And I do want to say that for first years, we do not have singles. You may hear this a little bit more if you go to afternoon program with my colleague Melissa Quimby, but we believe because of the strength of community that students should be living with individuals to get to know them, to figure out how to share their space, to figure out how to create conversations about how you live with somebody and how you figure that out. All of our floors, there was an earlier question, all of our floors are co-ed. We do not have single-sex floors, but we do have rooms can also sort of operate in what we talk about as a chem-free space. Students who opt not to engage in decisions around alcohol, we work with those students to ensure that their roommates are making the same decisions. I can get into that more in a bit if you want. So we have residential life here on campus. It's in student affairs. The Outing Club, which is an incredible space. This is a beautiful state. Maine is an incredible state. And our Outing Club is an amazing resource to get students who are familiar with the outdoors out and about in all sorts of ways. But their biggest win, their biggest love, is to getting students who may think, I don't want to camp. I don't want to go in a kayak, to find the love and joy that that experience can bring. Student activities, we have about 130 student groups on our campus, everything from a cappella groups to the chess club to affinity groups that operate in a whole bunch of different ways around students' interests, desires, and ways to participate and engage with one another. Our McKean Center for the Common Good, where students are working to connect to the communities. A lot of that is here locally in Brunswick, but students are also afforded opportunities to engage with communities further away in Maine as well as across the country. We do alternative spring break trips, and so students who are interested in participating in community engagement can do it in California and Arizona and Florida and other kinds of opportunities. We do have our Dean of Students office, and our Dean of Students office, Clayton talked about our students' dean. And every student at Bowdoin, we have our Dean of Students office that has 4 full-time deans. 2 are actually 5, I'm sorry. 2 are essentially focused on the first-year class, and so every first-year student gets the opportunity to either meet with Dean Quimby or Dean Hussey to talk about their experience, to talk about their needs, to talk about sort of where their successes are, but also where their challenges are. And then we have a set of upper class deans that work with our sophomores, juniors, and seniors. The Dean of Students office, I will say, is the place where students find, I'm going to sound dated here, so I apologize, particularly to the students, but it's a bit of a switchboard. It's a Google. There you go. That's what it is. It's Google. So that, students can show up to the dean's office and say, I don't know where to go for X. And the dean is going to say, these are the opportunities you can find in navigating things. Our Dean of Students office works with students around transition, challenge, I'll say conduct because I need to say conduct. Sometimes students make mistakes. And for a highly accomplished group of students, that can feel really, really catastrophic. Our deans are there to tell students, this is the safest place for you to make a mistake. I'm not encouraging big, egregious mistakes. But that really we are a place that want to teach students to learn and grow, and we give students opportunities to make mistakes, understand where those mistakes happened, and then think about their contributions moving forward. The Division of Student Affairs also includes health, counseling and wellness center, and I really want to say counseling and wellness. This is a pretty innovative space on our campus. We do have mental health counselors and resources around counseling, but our counseling center also works very hard on wellness efforts. How do we think about sort of proactively giving students the keys to opportunities to take care of themselves as they are navigating their academic program and the rest of their experiences here at the college? We and the Division of Student Affairs sort of talk about sort of what's our mission? What are the things that we think are critical to sort of who we are and what we do? Much of it is supporting students, giving students opportunities to make decisions and pull things together and program or create a new club or think about how they want to find their way beyond their academic choices. But I will also say, and Jen talked a little bit about this, is we also challenge students along the way. That is part of their growth. And while we think about the faculty as educators, because that is a big part of how they teach, they are educators, the staff in student affairs also think of themselves as educators. How are they working with students to really get them to think broadly, to engage in things, sometimes to be comfortable with the uncomfortable rather than just running away. And so we really do think about the ways in which we are working with students on their growth, development, and contributions to community. What I want to say about community, and Clayton talked about it and Jen talked about it, is the last 2 years have on many levels upended how we think about community. We've had students in rooms Zooming in for their classes. We've limited the size in which students can operate outside the classroom. So we have limited, students want to get together for a various event or want to have certain kinds of opportunities in what are called our college houses. We have been limiting sizes, not because we don't want them to happen, but because we've had to do those things in light of COVID. One of the things our staff has been thinking a lot about, and we hope that September can afford us this, is how do we reestablish community amongst students who haven't had that opportunity for the past 2 years? And I don't have an answer for it yet, but I do want to say it's very much on our mind. Students who are somewhat resistant to know what that looks like and how to do it, but we believe strongly that that is one of the critical parts of who we are at Bowdoin, and so we are committed to figuring out how to reestablish what that looks like. You're going to hear a lot about the first year experience, I think, later today, and sort of how we think about the first year experience, everything from orientation trips to pre-major academic advisors to how we think about roommates and what happens in the first year dorms. But I also want to be really clear that we don't just stop at the end of the first year. We have a sophomore experience, what we call sort of the year of decision making, whether it's what major students are going to take or whether they're going to study away their junior year, what their internship opportunities might look like, and our sophomore boot camp that Clayton talked about. Really, every sophomore engages in that. That is essentially January before the spring semester starts. And students are really digging in deep to making a whole host of decisions around what they want their sophomore experience to look like and beyond. So I really sort of want you to recognize that we in the Division of Student Affairs are thinking a lot about students' holistic experience. We partner very closely with our faculty. I love the fact that our faculty are key advisors for a number of programs that happen and are supported by Student Affairs. We co-sponsor events with faculty. And I think it's important for you to know, to Jen's point, these are faculty who have incredible scholarship and think greatly about their teaching, but they also think about what it means to be in this place. And so I'm sort of going to end there. I do want to say I have a broken ankle, and what I can say is, in Maine, when it snows and you go for a run, you can slip on ice and gravity happens. So just a fair forewarning on that, and then I'll sort of open it up. We'll sort of open it up to questions, and folks can fire away.
We do have a couple of mic runners there, so please take advantage.
Hi, I've talked to a couple of students yesterday, and they were saying that some of them may have had some trouble getting the classes that they wanted to get. So can you describe the process of course registration?
Sure. So the last couple of semesters, we have had far more uneven numbers of students on campus than we are accustomed to for our regular planning. So, you know, we had students who took leaves because of the pandemic and then came back, so they were off cycle. So we generally you know, have a pretty good registration system. It's been a little bit challenged, but our faculty have responded. It has been the case that we've had to add classes past our regular registration period because we've figured out what the needs are, mostly, honestly, related to the pandemic. You know, there can be times when a student doesn't get a class. The registration then they would get preference the following semester to enroll in that class. They also would work really closely with their academic advisor to figure out how it is that they can complete a major that they want to complete. Our faculty are the students' first pre-major advisors. When students come, they're assigned a pre-major advisor for their first 2 years. That person will help them really navigate the curriculum, navigate the distribution requirements that I mentioned earlier, and start to think about, you know, what their interests are. We're very purposeful in not having students declare a major when they get here. We want students to explore. There are many students who come to Bowdoin with an idea and then they take a class. You know, there are many things we offer here that students haven't been exposed to before. So whether that, in some cases, it might be art history, or it might be economics, or it might be gender and women's studies. There are all kinds of things. And that can, and ideally does, help shape students and what it is that they decide they want to do. So I think we have a good registration process. We have had to, in the last couple of years, I will say, be more responsive after our regular registration process when we run into bumps. but our faculty have responded by adding additional sections. Occasionally we've had to hire people, but we've mostly found a way to work it out. And some of that is working closely individually with students who are affected and finding ways for them to graduate when they need to with their major completed.
Hello. Thank you both for spending time with us here this morning. I'm in the middle here. I guess I'll preface my question with this. I think where I'm from, and I'm sure where a lot of the other students here are from, GPA is kind of seen as like the almighty thing. And when students are writing a paper, when they're taking a test, they're thinking, if I don't do well on this, it's going to kill my GPA. And it's really in the forefront of people's minds. And I would argue that that gets in the way of learning. Could you speak to how at Bowdoin, do people think about that, or do people learn for the sake of learning? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
That's such a great question. So of course, from my perspective and the perspective of the faculty, we really want students to engage in learning for the sake of learning. That is, both Clayton and I spoke about our commitment to the liberal arts. We believe that all of the experiences that students have in classrooms ultimately should be formative. So they should have an impact on you, regardless of the grade that you get. They should help you think more broadly. But I'll be honest, we do bump up against student resistance around GPA. So we have a faculty committee. It's called our Curricular and Educational Policy Committee. There are 2 students on that committee. They are such great students. We're having such a good year this year, really tackling some of these kinds of related questions. And, we have students who might want us to make some policy changes that will do more to protect GPA. So, for example, when you can declare something credit or fail rather than for a grade. And we're pushing back against students when we think their actions are really based on GPA protection. So these are things we talk about, we encourage. I mentioned that faculty seminar group this week. A couple of the people in that group are really doing some interesting experimenting with grading, contract grading, ungrading, and they're doing that talking with students actually and collectively arriving at some alternatives that simultaneously emphasize learning and take a little bit of the pressure off. But this is a concern that we have, that students are very much tied up in their GPA. I want to say one more thing about that I learned from someone in Janet's division, and that's Kristen Brennan, who is the head of our Career Exploration Service. Now, both Clayton and Janet mentioned CXD. It's hard for me to imagine another school that is engaged in these questions so deeply about what does it mean to link all of that deep learning that we're so interested in with thinking about what happens when you leave here. We want our students to be successful. We also want our students to be a little bit more free about defining what that means. And so one of the things that we learned from Kristen's research, she is the head of this office, but she also engages in research about the very questions she talks about with students. She found that the single most important thing for employers is not GPA, and it's not what major you have. It's, have you looked for an internship or some way in which you have actually engaged in the thing you care about, so that in an interview for whatever it is, you have something to talk about. Your GPA isn't going to get you very far in terms of having a real conversation with someone, but actually having thought about your work and thought about how it applies in the world is very important. And so you'll hear a lot of that here as a student.
I'm going to add to that. I think Jen did a great job. It is something we talk about a great deal. And I know we inherit it, right? You have spent a period of time focused on that. So suddenly you show up to Bowdoin and you move into your first year dorm and we say, don't worry about that. Not to ignore it, but don't put it in the same, doesn't need to feel as high stakes. And that is a hard thing for students to sort of recalibrate accordingly. Jen used an expression, we try to get students to slow down, right? And I'm gonna, again, date myself and say, slow down, you move too fast, you gotta make the moment last, right? And we, we're not giving up on this, but it continues to be something we revisit with students time and time again around everything doesn't need to be high stakes. Learning and engaging for the sake of learning and engaging is critical for how it is you want to sort of experience this place and what you are learning along the way and what it means beyond Bowdoin. The last thing I'm going to say is about CXD and internships. We've referenced that a few times. We do have funded internships here at the college, and so what that means over the summer is that students can apply to any number of places, and the college will pay students $5,000 for those internships. So if you, again, a lot of the work around the common good, but also any number of other kinds of opportunities that students may say, I really want this, but the agency may not have the resources to pay, or the students may not have, may have to not make, the kinds of money that they need to be able to do all the things that they do. Clayton raised this. It's one of our efforts around access, is ensuring that students who want to pursue these internship opportunities, we have an application process. This year we're giving, I think, about 120. That's only through CXD. We also have paid internships through our McKean Center, but a big part of that is we don't want students to feel as if they can't pursue an internship because of the financial implications of what that might mean.
Great question. For those of you who didn't hear, it's about how is Bowdoin's commitment to the common good integrated into the curriculum. I'll say two things. One is that a number of classes have community engagement components to them, and so they, the students are learning in the classroom, but they have the opportunity to go to a community agency, or there are so many students who go into our schools, and our public schools, our local public schools, or into community agencies, or engage in some way or another, and it's directly tied into the curriculum. And then the second thing I just want to say is that an example of kind of the ways that we think about the common good permeating what we do. We are undergoing, this is boring, but we have a accreditor that accredits the college. And every 10 years we have a very significant accreditation. Right now we're in the 5-year reaccreditation. One of the things they asked us to do is develop institutional learning goals. So what are our learning goals across the college? So academic affairs and student affairs, and a group of us has been working for several months on this. We've brought them to the faculty. Faculty have talked about them a lot. And what was really interesting for me was in these faculty conversations, how much they valued that our commitment to the common good was embedded in those institutional learning goals. And it was just very nice to see, actually, how important the faculty, people might think, oh, it's a little corny, we talk about the common good all the time, but when push comes to shove, faculty themselves really wanted to make sure that showed up in our learning goals, because they believe they're integrating that into their classes, whether it's very deliberately and kind of structurally with these visits that I just mentioned, or it's part of the ways that they think about their own fields and the kinds of readings they assign and the ways they think about what their field is in the world.
Do you want to ask? And then we'll go down here. Yeah.
Hi. Hi. So there have been a few talking points today about touching on what the COVID situation has been like since the pandemic started here at Bowdoin. And I know you can't predict what it'll be like next year, but what do you expect it will be like next year? What's the plan? Sorry.
Who's recording this meeting? This is a live stream meeting, right? So I don't know. I know what I'm aspirationally hoping for, which is that we're in this space without masks and we are doing all of the things that we want to deliver to all of you. You know, I can't express that enough. That is where we want to be. We will have to wait and see where things play out with, you know, the CDC, the main CDC, and how we are making those decisions accordingly. I'm sorry I couldn't be clear. I don't know if Jen's got a crystal ball.
No crystal ball, but sadly, the only thing I would add is that our decision making, you know, for 2 years, Janet and I have been in countless meetings with a group of people. We have one today. And I just want to say what drives us, which is that we're driven by care for our community. And so, you know, some people have thought we were too conservative or not conservative enough. We're really driven by people's safety, and then how do we think about that in relation to the ability of our students to really have a college experience? Those two things are often in tension, and we're very careful about how we talk about those and how we think and how we plan. And so we're always trying to maximize student opportunity, but we're always mindful of the care that we owe everybody.
The last thing I want to say is our students have been incredible. They really have. I work with you know, peers across other institutions, and you know, there's been certain institutions that have really struggled with how students have felt really restricted, and where that shows up. And our students, to Jen's point, we've worked hard at trying to create opportunities for students in a whole host of ways, and I think our students recognize that, even with the limitations, and they have just really been a big part of ensuring that we're moving on, even in light of the restrictions. I just can't say enough about how incredible our students have been through this.
Can I just add one quick thing? Clayton spoke about community, including students and faculty, but also staff. One of the amazing things for me over the last 2 years is that because of COVID, I'm regularly in conversation with people outside of academic affairs who I wouldn't be in as deep conversation with. And just one example of people's care during COVID is dining services. Just truly remarkable how I would be in these meetings and I just would not walk away. I was standing in front of my computer many, many hours, but feeling like, wow, these people are committed. Even if the meal is going in a paper sack and the student is taking it back to their room, the folks in dining are committed that that food will be healthy and tasty, flavorful, and nourishing in a whole host of ways. So the students really have come through, the faculty have come through, the staff have come through all across the college, and that inspires, you know, all of us to do better.
Yeah, so I've got a concrete question, but then with a slightly more searching follow-on. The concrete question is, in non-pandemic times, what percentage of Bowdoin students during their 4 years study on off-campus programs? And then the other is a little more imponderable, but I am curious your view. During the pandemic, have you learned things, your faculty members, that are going to influence how you teach and the way you teach, maybe in more permanent ways? Maybe intro or survey classes can be done more remotely or using pre-programmed, or in terms of the teaching, do you think you're just going to go back to normal? What part of the pandemic lessons endure?
Great. So in terms of the percentage of students, Janet, do
To
you
study
know?
away?
Yeah.
We have about 130 students on average who study. This is pre-pandemic. Actually, I think we almost have 130 this semester,
I
too.
think so.
So it is about 130 to 150 each semester that study away. Almost all of them are juniors, although I do want to give a shout out to our incredibly smart students. So we have a number of students who are off semester because they took a leave of absence last year because they didn't want to be fully remote, which is how we taught our classes, most of our classes last year. So we have 44 students who are off. They're supposed to graduate in May, but they have one semester because they took off, and they're all going to study away their last semester. And I'm like, that is brilliant. These are brilliant students. So it is about 130 to 150 each semester that study away. I don't know, out of a percentage of 500 students. Yeah, but it's significant. It can be, some of those students are away for a full year. There's about 25 to 30 of them that are spending the full year away, and then it's about 120 unique students each semester.
And in terms of what are the lessons of the pandemic, we've spent a lot of time talking about that in any number of ways. But in terms of classrooms and pedagogical approaches, one thing I know many faculty learned is that creating short video lectures can be really helpful for students because they can watch them again and again. And so some faculty have continued that practice even when they're back in person with students. I think people have experimented with different ways of creating community in classes, and so different ways of breaking students up into groups for conversation online to keep them engaged may be working as well inside of classrooms. We put together it was called BOLT, the Bowdoin Online Learning and Teaching Group, and it was representatives from information technology, academic technology, faculty, academic affairs, the library, and that group of people worked really tirelessly through the pandemic to make sure that our faculty had all of the resources they needed to be able to do their classes well online. And again, some of those things people are experimenting with now. How do we use technology most effectively with our students? So there's no substitute. We really believe there's no substitute for the kinds of in-person engagement that really enhance learning. But I think students will find that different faculty are using technology within the classroom, maybe in new ways that they think are mostly, I would say, supplements, not replacements for what we do in person.
Thanks. Hi. If you could just clarify again, I asked earlier about the co-ed dorms, and I just want to be clear, and I'm not. What exactly are the logistics with the bathroom usage in the co-ed dorms? And as a follow-up, if there's an option for students who want to de-emphasize alcohol use, is there not an option for people that would be more comfortable, say, on an all-girl floor as opposed to the mixed gender floor? Thank you.
Sure. All of our floors are mixed gender. Our rooms are not mixed gender. So I want to be clear on that. So we have quads that are primarily the dorms that are around the quad here. There are 3 rooms. There's a common room, and then there's 2 separate bedrooms, and each bedroom has 2 students. That's the primary configuration for our first-year dorms. We also have some other Osher and West, which are newer dorms, which they're doubles. But every dorm, every first year, essentially can expect to have a roommate. The floors are co-ed, and so, there'll be 8 rooms on a floor. 4 of them will have all males, 4 of them will have females. There are female-only bathrooms and male-only bathrooms. I will say that some floors decide to make those bathrooms mixed gendered. That is a decision that the floor, everybody has to be in consensus on. But generally, there's a female bathroom and a male bathroom, and students use those accordingly. As far as sort of operating around decisions around alcohol and how students sort of think about that, we have really progressed in how we used to have what we called a chem-free dorm. It was a dorm where students made choices, and I recognize chem-free feels, I'm not comfortable with that word, but that's the word that we've used for a long time here. It's around choices around alcohol. Students who lived in that dorm very much felt as if they were stigmatized by living in that dorm. They felt as if that was somehow seen as not okay, and they wanted to sort of they didn't want to feel that stigma. I will also say that we are an incredibly diverse community on our campus, and Clayton talked about the fact that we continue to engage in bringing more people for whom this place would not have even been considered. So what we found in our chem-free dorms overwhelmingly were our first-gen students and our students of color. So there was a further sort of segmenting, unintentionally, but it was segmenting in ways in which we just didn't feel comfortable with. So then we went to sort of chem-free floors, where we had dorms, and floors themselves made the decisions accordingly. Again, students really gave us the feedback that also didn't feel like it was how they really wanted to create community. And so we are now at a place where the room, you will be assigned if you choose. And by the way, students should be filling out their housing forms. You'll probably hear this again. If you choose to come to Bowdoin, students should fill out their housing forms. But if students want to say, I want to be living in a space where people are not making choices that are not around alcohol, they will be assigned a chem-free room.
Hello, and thank you for the time that you're giving us. My question is about accessibility. And we have been talking about inclusivity, community, and all of this. I have a student at Bowdoin already. But what I'd like to know is, after the pandemic and all that, we all felt this kind of a non-inclusiveness all around. For the following generations, what will Bowdoin do to make the campus even more accessible than what it is now?
Are you talking about physical accessibility?
Differently abled, I mean, physical, or, there are different challenges, and more students are now coming up from high school being able to have a fuller life, fuller education.
Yep.
But unfortunately, when they come to these decisions, they find out that the campuses are not, or even the school itself is not really ready for them.
I really appreciate that question. This is a place where we are a work in progress. We do have a student accessibility task force, which includes faculty. It includes our facilities. It includes our director of student accessibility, Leslie Levy, and it includes sort of a master plan around how it is we are thinking about our buildings, our spaces, how faculty are teaching, how students are able to sort of navigate this space in a way that can feel inclusive. The example I'll give you, and again, this is a work in progress. We have very old buildings, and we have to sort of make decisions moving forward about this. But our student activities group, which is a group, as I said, we have about 130 student-led groups. And it is sort of, it's managed by our sort of student activities subcommittee, all students, as well as our student government. So it's all students making decisions. And right before the pandemic, that student group made the decision that all student groups that were chartered through the college and that were receiving money to be a student group had to meet in spaces that were accessible to students. So the decision here was, if we want everybody to feel as if they can participate in any number of the groups that we have to ensure that where students are meeting can meet the needs of the students as a whole. We spent a lot of time thinking about what those spaces were and how to construct them and how to think about timing on them. And we found ourselves struggling to ensure that we could do that. I want to admit that. But it is very much on our mind, and it is very much a really critical part of how we feel what we need to do moving forward.
If I could just add about physical accessibility. So as a faculty member at Bowdoin over, 15 years, I was in 3 different old houses, each of which was accessible on the first floor only, and their faculty offices on the second floor. We are a campus, this is a old New England setting. We have many buildings that are old, and they can't be made accessible beyond the first floor. But when we are doing extensive renovations or building new, this is top of our priority. So there's a building very close to here, Sills Hall, which will be vacated a year from now, and we will do a massive renovation. We will make sure that that building is completely accessible at that time. There's another building where the Visual Arts Center, which is accessible only on the first floor, where all of our discussions about what a renovation to that building would look like include figuring out how to put an elevator on a, design, sort of a building that was designed by a prominent architect to be very symmetrical. Well, we are going to have to mess around with that symmetricality to be able to do what we need to do. So it's a lot easier to think about moving forward how we are more accessible in terms of physically accessible, but it's quite challenging with the number of old buildings that we have.
I'm also going to add that our new residential spaces that we've built in the last few years are all accessible, and it's not just a select number of spaces in those, but all of those rooms have accessibility considerations.
Thank you.
One last question right over. Yeah, I think one last question would be great.
Thank you. Can you speak to just how strict Bowdoin's curriculum is? Because while I do understand that Bowdoin wants to discourage students from being able to completely avoid subjects that they find uninteresting, I also see value in students being able to choose classes that they find interesting and have agency over their academic journeys.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think we have a good balance there. We have 5 distribution requirements, and students take 32 classes to complete their degree. So we're not, invading all of their time here with things that they might not really want to engage with. I think the other way to think about it is how we think about those distribution requirements. So faculty design those thinking about students who have a wide range of interests and understanding that there are students who are taking those classes because they have to meet a distribution requirement but might not be deeply interested in the topic. And that informs the way they think about the content of the class, the invitation, sort of the philosophical invitation they extend with that class. And so the faculty aren't looking at those classes they teach as, oh, well, I need to create a class so that students can, get it out of the way, but rather, how can I design a class that is most likely to be inviting to those students who might not be inclined, and most likely to help them just expand the ways that they think a little bit.
I also want to add that each of the distribution requirements is not one class. So there are a range of classes under, visual and performing arts. So not everybody takes the same VPA. There's a whole range in a whole variety of disciplines. So you do have choice, even though there's distribution requirements. There's a whole host of choices under each of those requirements.
Okay. I think we're going to draw this to a close so we don't prevent you from doing all of the other wonderful things that you have lined up for today. Thank you.
Thank you.